Welcome to another edition of the Late to Grid podcast. This is your host, Bill Snow, and I think this is the most guests I've ever had in an episode, and we're going to be talking about something OPTT. This is not a 90s rap song. This is something that's motorsports related. It's for a lot of different sort of folks that have lots of track experience and some that may not even have a lot of track experience. We've got the experts to explain what it is, folks that have done it before, and you're going to learn all about it. So if this is the first time you're tuning in to the Late to Grid podcast, thanks for being here. And if you're a returning listener, Mom, thank you for listening. But let's get into it, guys. Thank you all for being here. For the folks that are listening to the podcast, they can't see you. So we're going to go around and introduce yourselves, and we're going to start with the way I see you on my screen. So Eric, we're going to start with you.
All right. I am Eric Franz. I am a Northeast Ohio-based car enthusiast, mechanical engineer by trade, but I run a twin-turbo 350Z in time trial challenges, and got a few other cars that we may talk about later, and then I'm also on an endurance race team that kind of runs in this general area as well.
Good, and thanks for coming back. You've been a previous guest, so I'm going to link to your previous episode that we have. And next is Chris Carlisle.
Hi, my name is Chris Carlisle. I drive an S2000 in Sport 4 now, and I'm from the Steel Cities region. And I also have a backup car, which is an 89 Civic that is slowly working its way from autocross to time trial. And happy to be returning again, Bill.
Yeah, thanks for being back. And many of you might recognize Chris from his Joy Killer Racing episode that we had before. Another returning guest, DDR, Dan Dennehy. Dan, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Dan Dennehy Rodriguez. I use the nickname DDR just to make everyone's life that much easier because I have a ridiculous last name. I'm the partner relationship manager for the SCCA and happen to be here in beautiful, sunny Pittsburgh. I race a Volkswagen Rabbit, which is currently an ITS car. And am building a Toyota Cresta to be my next time attack car. But I've been doing time trial for the past 5 years, autocross previous to that. And I'm really stoked to be spending some time with some really good friends talking about time trial.
Yeah, and Dan, we had you and Chris on after the SCCA Enduro from 2022. So thanks for coming back. And ladies and gentlemen, someone I've been trying to get for quite a while, the infamous Taylor Allen. Taylor, it's great to finally have you on the podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit more about your motorsports background.
I'm really glad to be here. Yeah, thanks. It's my first time on this one. I'm another guy from Northeast Ohio. I'm also a mechanical engineer by trade. My voice is a little raspy. Sorry about that. I've got a C5 Z06 that I use for primarily time trial here in T2. It's in various states of disarray, and then I also have a C6 World Challenge Corvette that is even more disassembled. I've done a lot of vintage stuff, primarily crewing and working and wrenching on stuff up through vintage Indy cars and a bunch of goofy nonsense, and just glad to be on track with a bunch of people here that I call my friends.
Yeah, well, thanks all of you for being here and taking some time to talk about motorsports and time trials and your background as well. So, Dan, I'm going to introduce or have you kind of explain a little bit more about this OPTT, have your friends help you a little bit, but I got to tell you, time attack time trials over the last several seasons have gotten extremely popular, haven't they?
Yeah, they really have, and I think it's in part because there is a need for something in between autocross track events and wheel-to-wheel racing. One thing that drew me to time trial is that it allows you to go at 10/10ths pace on a full track, but you can do so in street cars. And from a region's perspective, talking not as someone who works for the club, but rather a member of the club, it's a great way to add amplification to road race weekends or weekends in general, because frankly, it's a great way of growing the sport. It's a younger group. It's a fun group. I think there's a lot that just brings people together around time trial that's unique versus other programs. And it's been a lot of fun to see how the time trial population has really grown in both the Ohio and the Pittsburgh market. Everyone on this call I've met, except for Chris, through time trial. And it's been a lot of fun to have this new population of people come up, because I think everyone on this call, we don't just do time trial, we do other things. We do endurance racing, we do autocross, we do other forms of auto hooliganism. But the thing that keeps bringing us back is time trial. And so to talk more about what OPTT is Ohio, Pennsylvania Time Trial. It's basically an idea that was fostered between a bunch of time trialers in Ohio, in Pittsburgh. If you're from the market, then you know we already have a bit of a rivalry, right? We might have some Browns fans against Steeler fans, against Cincinnati fans, or something like that, right? So there's already this built-in angst when you cross the border between our two states. But what's been a lot of fun is that we happen to have two really excellent road courses just down the street, 45 minutes from one another, in Nelson Ledges and Pit Race. And specifically the regions of Steel City and NEOhio, I've really grown close to both leaderships. And so it made a lot of sense to try to basically cross-pollinate. Now, the whole championship idea was originally Chris Carlisle's idea. So I'm going to let him talk more about the culture behind it. And he also has a great take on how things came to be. And a little bit later, we can talk more about what we intend to do this year in 2023.
So yeah, around this time last year, a bunch of emails started flying. Gotta give a shout out to Dave Lancaster, because he was one of the people too that was pretty incremental on this. Like Dan said, we had people on both sides of the fence with NEOhio and Steel Cities that kind of wanted to see this happen. And Dave was a big part. Dan, Taylor brought Hawk backing in. So we've had a lot of moving pieces. Everybody was really, we had a bunch of people that were really willing to see a program like this take off. And I think the time was right for this to finally take place in 2022. And we had a really good year. I mean, some of the other guys can fill in, but we had people coming back because they felt like they were doing something. They were chasing points. You weren't just doing like HPD style lapping. You were trying to go faster. You were competing in your class. You're competing against your friends. A lot of us became friends from going to these events. And it was great to see it grow, despite the fact it was really just thrown together over a couple emails. And we're like, well, we'll just see where things go. And it worked out better than I think any of us could have expected. For we had 4 events last year between Nelson's and Pit Race, and I was just really proud of everyone to see them, everyone coming back, and it was a good time.
Am I remembering correctly that Indy got involved in the last event, or am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, Indy region, I think caught wind of what we were doing, wanted to emulate some of what we were doing. Vinny Tiabi over there has become a good buddy. So he and a couple of his buddies came out to the last event at Nelson Ledges. It also helped that it was a beautiful day in October. And so what's a couple hour drive down the street to run at Nelson Ledges in like perfect 68 degree, no humidity weather. So it was a really fun weekend, really fun event. But it's also been fun to see a lot of other regions emulate some similar concepts, where instead of just trying to stand up singular events, they're wanting to connect them with some kind of narrative around either a points chase or a challenge.
Yeah, and there's so much, there's not competition. We're not competing necessarily with other regions. We are, for the trophies and stuff in TT, but, we can all learn from one another. And so why not have the regions work a little bit more closely together? And we learn some best practices from them, and they learn some best practices from you guys. So I think it's a great idea to involve multiple regions. Aside from NEOhio and Steel Cities, are you expecting other regions to participate, maybe even informally, in this year's program?
That's a really good question. Right now, when we start talking about the concept of 2023, I'll allude to something that we're working on. We can't let the cat out of the bag yet. When we talk about scheduling dates, the challenge as well as the championship, there might be an 8th event at a 3rd location. And if and when that happens, it would be quite an awesome get, because it's going to allow for us to visit really a national level track in the peak time of year. So we're working with other regions and other time trial chairs to try to affect our schedule and theirs. And it's been a lot of fun. It's one of the things I think that's been changing within the club within the past few years is the ability of regions to want to work more with one another, to increase car counts, to make weekends feel more special. And that's something that, as someone who's a 5+ year member, I can mark as something different within the club over the past couple of years. That's a really cool thing, that you can go to other regions and do some work with them and make for some really great outcomes. So there's more to come. We can't just announce it yet.
All right, fair enough. So I want to make sure that we explain to the listener who might not know what a time trial is. Talk about what it is conceptually, and then if somebody could talk about kind of what the day or weekend even looks like, what they could expect during the day. Who wants to explain what a time trial is?
Sure, I'll go.
Anybody but Dan. He's pointing. All right, Taylor.
So from its basic standpoint, time trial is like just trying to set the perfect lap. It's not only maximizing, maximizing your car's ability to set a fast lap. It's also your own personal driving ability, and also takes in consideration the track conditions and weather. But ultimately, it's how fast can you make one single lap and put everything together.
And there's multiple cars on track, but you're spread out for the most part, right, Eric?
Yeah, that's correct. Typically, we would do a kind of a trial run or a practice session early in the day, and that gets the organizers some kind of idea of lap times per car. And so you're gridded by fastest to slowest, so that in theory, everybody's running away from everybody. So that way there's less chance of having one car catch another, and that way everybody has the best chance to get in that fast lap. Because in reality, most people are going to set their fast lap in probably the first 3 to 4 laps before tires get too hot or engines get too hot. And one thing to add is that, as Taylor was noting, it's trying to set your fastest lap, but there is actually 2 components to time trials. There are both track sprints and time attacks. The time attack is that best lap. The track sprint is actually, it's sectioning up the course. It basically is turning the racetrack into an autocross without cones. And different events and different organizations run them differently. Sometimes you'll do both in a single day. You'll do track sprints in the morning and time attack in the afternoon. Sometimes if it's a 2-day event, you'll do track sprints in the morning or day 1 and time attack day 2. But what the track sprint really does, and it's really helpful for people who are just getting into the sport of time trial, because if they're coming from autocross, it lets them see the track at a little bit lower speed, piece by piece. So at Nelson Ledges, they'll break the track into 3 sections with overlap. So you'll get to run every corner on the track at least twice at speed. And that works out really well for those folks that are coming from trying to step up from autocross. It gives them a chance to see the track and start getting an idea of the line and the speeds that you can carry through the corners. And then the next day, you come back and you get to go do the whole thing.
Do you think having the track sprint helps the driver learn those corners, so then day 2 they have a better approach or maybe a more refined driving style?
Oh, it definitely does, especially if it's a new to you track or a new configuration. At pit race, sometimes we'll run just the south track or just the north track, and most of the time trial, or most of the HPDE days, you're running full course. The first time I ever ran just the South Track at Pit Race was the first time trial last year.
Yep, mine as well. And it was a lot of fun. First time driving it.
That last turn, though, whew, boy,
a little scary.
A little scary.
You enjoy it until you look at your front left tire and go, "Oh my God, what have I done? What have I done?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you come over that hill and that wall is staring you right in the face.
So, in terms of somebody that's never done it before, can they participate in OPTT and the time trial events?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great place for a beginner to start. I had only done a handful of HPDE events before I actually did my first real track day at Nelson Ledges in a SCCA time trial. It's a great place, I think, for beginners that have put that foundation together, and they can be in the advanced intermediate group. And also, there's a novice group specifically for that. So you can be a person, you'll have a coach and excellent resources, and like some other people have alluded to, even though we're competing against each other, we're all still there to help each other. At the end of the day, we're all car enthusiasts and want to see everyone have a good time.
Awesome. So is that coach right seat coaching, or is it after the session that they get coaching?
After the session, in my experience.
Okay.
So you can bring questions, and you'll have different, sometimes depending on how many staff the particular event may have. You may have different observation stations where someone may be watching a specific corner and watching the novice group go through and can help give some tips and tricks.
Yeah, so for the listeners that haven't been on track yet, there's really one tried and true way to get faster, and that's seat time. And if you can have seat time with some coaching, that's even better, to walk you through turn-in points, braking points, where you need to be looking, things you need to be worried about, not worried about. So if you can get to an event like this, one of these time trials events where there's coaching available, that is going to be so helpful. Does anybody have a good coaching story they want to share where they learned something that helped them?
I think I don't mean to keep talking, but I had a pretty good one where I was in an NA Miata. I was maybe 7th in my class, and Mike Kubiak actually helped me get through. I always mess up the turns in Nelson, but I think 12 and 13, the last left-hander before the big right. I could not get that down in the Miata, and he watched me, gave me some tips, watched another session. And specifically, if you looked at my data, through that section, I was able to get a podium finish. I went from 7th in my class to 3rd, specifically from Kubiak helping me at my first time at Nelson Ledges.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to message him and find out what tip he gave you.
Yeah, top secret. No, no, it was great. It was also my first time meeting Mike, so it was a new person on the track, and I asked for some help, and he helped me out.
Wow. His Miata is just a little bit bigger than your old Miata.
Yeah. A couple more cylinders in there, too.
Yeah, that's an NB. Well, you had an NA, but that's an NB and C5 joke. That's awesome. So let's continue to talk about someone that maybe hasn't been to one of these events or hasn't been to too many. What do they need to bring with them? What's required? What does tech look like? Eric, in your experience, what is that like?
So, as far as what you need to bring, I mean, it's basically similar to an autocross or a track day. The minimum requirement is a helmet, and that's really all you need to be able to come. Obviously, there's some waivers and some things when you get there and you sign up, but you need a car in good working order. Not dropping fluids, making sure all the bolts are tight, your wheels are tightened on. Having some basic tools and stuff with you is always a good idea. Some spare fluids and things like that. Bringing a good attitude, leaving the ego behind, is always a good thing to do. But yeah, it's, as far as tech goes, in general, a lot of our events are self-tech unless you have a pretty heavily modified car. When you start getting up into cars that have full race harnesses and roll cages and things like that, there's a little bit more safety checking involved to make sure that your belts and everything are still legal and up to date. But if you're bringing in a car that you drive on the street, I said for the most part, it's basically a self-tech, just like a Track Night in America event or a lot of the auto interest and other similar HPDE days. It's pretty low bar of entry.
Now, Dan, at the event, who's doing that more that more technical inspection of the vehicle, like the belts and safety stuff?
Yeah, you have to be licensed to be a tech inspector to be able to review and look at a fully prepped car. So like I carry that designation. What that basically means is that I've gone through the curriculum of recognizing, where a harness needs to be worn, i.e. Having a full cage or partial cage that facilitates the proper usage of a harness, checking your Hans device if you're using such a setup, reviewing to make sure that your extinguisher is checked and that this is done and that this other thing is in its place. Essentially, when we get to that place of safety, those tend to be cars that have a logbook, meaning that they've been reviewed and deemed a race vehicle. Now, as I say that, one of the really important things to mention with time trial that makes it different from wheel-to-wheel competition, we will always encourage safety. We will never discourage most cars from the track. In fact, in most cases, so long as your car is wider than it's tall, it's permissible to go on track. We just need to make sure we find the right class for it. And just like Eric was saying, so long as it's a safe vehicle, usually the yardstick that I use is it currently inspected? And if so, then you probably have something that you can turn out to a time trial and have some fun with. So one of the most important tenets of time trial is that it's an incredibly inclusive program within motorsport, and that includes the car, because the recognition is many perceive finances and their vehicle as a barrier to entry. And I have seen, and that should be a good question we should all answer. Personally, the most ridiculous car I've seen compete in a time trial was a Ford Transit van that was adorned with the same livery as a Solo coffee cup. So it was white with that teal flash on the side. And what he did to meet the regs is he got some Taurus SHO wheels that were like 1.5 inches wider. So that was 3 inches wider. And he was just 1.5 inches wider than he was tall. And he was able to go out and compete. So you see some really cool things that come out and have fun at a time trial event.
Eric, what's maybe the most wildest or most everyday car that you've seen on track at a time trial?
I'm fairly certain I've seen a Subaru Outback wagon at an event.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Shout out to Ashley.
That's exactly who I was thinking of.
Ashley
Yep.
Medwick.
Is that the one that had the kayak rack on top?
Yep.
I think I've seen that one at an event. That's awesome.
Yeah. And one thing, just to kind of step back real quick on the whole, roll cage and all the heavily modified vehicles, at least in the Ohio, Pennsylvania region, they're actually extremely rare. The vast majority of cars are street cars. I'm probably one of 5 or less cars that typically shows up with a full caged car that shouldn't be on the street.
Right. And Eric, does yours have a logbook?
Not yet.
No. Okay. All right. So, Chris, how about you? Question to you. Maybe the craziest or the most simple car that you've seen at a time trial event?
Oh, it was by far and away the Honda Fit that shamed my car doing burnouts last year. We were doing the track sprints at Nelson's Ledges, and Dave Lancaster was on his 5th cup of coffee and telling everybody to do a burnout off the line. And someone brought out this bone stock red Honda Fit, exactly the same as my daily driver, and it was in front of me. And every time he would go, he's like, light him up, and this little Fit would just drag the tires off the start and just peel them out the whole way. My S2000 couldn't hold a candle to him. It was terrible. Every time I would just try and just drop the clutch, it would just sit there and bog and just, shamefully roll away. But I thought that was a really good example, too. A Honda Fit is a very unpretentious car. If it's out there doing what we do, you have pretty much no excuse. So I love that example. I love that he was out there just tearing it up.
Yeah. And Taylor, same question to you. Simplest or craziest car?
So Chris stole mine. That's actually one of our good friends, Luis, here in Northeast Ohio. He's got a couple project cars, and that was supposed to be his daily driver and his girlfriend's car. Um, yeah, and like you mentioned, the most unpretentious. It was bone stock, almost 200,000 miles. I think really there's one that I really liked was actually a Focus wagon, one of like the first gen Focus wagons. And it was the person's daily driver. It did have coilovers and 17 by like A8s or 9s on it, but it still was a fully functional, 2 rows of seats, station wagon Focus that is easily, you drove it there, put spares in it, no worries, and drove it home. It's a great example. I think we've all had good examples of you can use your everyday car. Just make sure it's safe.
Yeah. So, April 22nd, there's the Day of Motorsports at Nelson Ledges. So this episode is going to come out well in advance of that. So if somebody wants to learn more about it, they can learn more about the time trial program there, I know. And Dan, you're kicking off the presentations by giving an overview of SCCA, right?
Yeah, I sure am. So I apologize in advance for my terrible 30-minute speech, but I'm very excited for that day because I think it's going to be a great opportunity for anyone who's interested, but wants the ability to interact, to ask questions, to learn more, to be able to come. I think in that day, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to hear from a lot of voices, some that may or may not be on this call. But then also we're going to have a track night in America at the end of that event. So it'll be a great opportunity to come learn more about these kinds of events, about what the SCCA is, and then also come out and participate and have fun with us. So that's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if someone doesn't even know if they're ready for a time trial, if they haven't been on track before, that track night in America would be a great thing to try out, put their car on track, put themselves behind the wheel, and if they enjoy it, time trials would be a logical next step for them, right?
Absolutely. Actually, Luis is a great example because he got pulled into the vortex of danger that is the Hawk team.
Yeah.
Just a great core of humans, about 10, 12 deep, that every time you see any one of them, you know your weekend's going to be better. Luis went to a motorsport event and with his crew and asked, how difficult would it be to get on track? I think 2 weeks later, he showed up that very same weekend we keep referring to. And by the end of that weekend, within a month, he had the same suspension as a B-Spec, because I sold him that. He had new wheels and tires, because we helped him source them. He, of course, had a whole group of parts and things like that. But it's a great example of someone who sought out a community, very quickly got a lot of questions answered, and what's really great with Luis is a great example of how someone can very quickly go from auto curious to auto participant, because now he's a lifer. I can guarantee you he's going to be at way more events coming up. So,
and then also with the Day of Motorsports on April 22nd, are there going to be folks that do need to get their car tech inspected? Will they have the opportunity to have that done for the season at that event? I know road racers will get their logbooks and annual inspections updated, but what about time trialers?
Yeah, if anyone has any vehicles that they want me to check, I'm happy to do so. Just basically during the flow of Saturday, give me a holler, and I'm happy to check your car out. And apologies for the bark behind me. That's my 5-year-old puppy saying hello to everyone.
It wanted in on the action.
Yeah, and one quick thing to add about this Day of Motorsports, we're going to have, several of us are going to have cars there, and we're trying to make sure that we have a wide range of vehicles there for people to come look at. So I know, I think we've already got Devin lined up, and Devin's kind of the extreme end. He's an unlimited one Mustang that, I don't know how much of that Mustang's left, but it is, man, you want to see somebody really moving on a track. Devin rolls out, there's a chance that a class record's going to get broken. But we're also going to have a couple other guys out, some guys that we all know and are good friends with that, a near stock GTI, super popular for these types of events. And not sure who else we're going to get out there yet, but we're going to try and have a mix of vehicles out there that people can, to show that you don't need a race car. You don't need something crazy. You can come out here with just about anything and have a good time with us.
Yeah. If folks want to learn more about time trials, either in Steel Cities, NEOhio, or the OPTT, what's the best way for them to learn more?
I'll go.
I think we've got a pretty good Facebook group. That might be a good place to start. Everyone pretty much uses social media, and I think that's a great place to initially reach out.
There's an Ohio/PA or PA/Ohio. I can't remember which the order is.
We'll have to switch depending on who gets the most points.
There you go.
Exactly. Yeah, but there's an Ohio PA time trial and HPDE group. I think that's what the name is. Something very similar to that people can find on Facebook and do that. The NEOhio SCCA has a website as well as Steel Cities STC SCCA, and both of those regions should have at least basic information, and if they don't have the current schedule up, I'm sure they will soon.
Yeah, and we'll link to all of those to the Facebook group and then also to each website so listeners can just go there, click, and then find even more information about the events. Talk for a minute, and maybe Eric or Chris, you guys can talk about this. So the camaraderie, if someone's not familiar with the type of camaraderie and the support that happens in the paddock between sessions and after the event, especially if it's a 2-day event, what is that like? What can people expect hanging out at the track?
We're a pretty laid-back group for the most part. It's kind of funny because, time trial, I don't want to say it's serious, but it's a little bit dangerous what we're doing. You're pushing a car to its limit around the track, but the actual vibes in the paddock are very relaxed. Everyone's super friendly in our group and very welcoming. Like Eric, I didn't know him really before last year, and then I think by halfway through the year, we were basically packed next to each other at the soft track and just kind of hanging out. And we're with Toby and everybody else. A lot of our people come over too from track night, and it's very much kind of that same, just kind of very low key, I want to say not too serious, but we're very easygoing. We don't really yell at anybody. We have a pretty good schedule and run our events, so things kind of just flow along very well. And yeah, what else to say about it?
All right. Well, let's talk about the schedule real quickly. Looks like the first event we have April 30th at Pit Race. It's the full track, but there's no novices at that first event. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. So talking through the schedule real quick, 2 events, which are our bookend events, are unique in that on April 30th at Pit Race and October 29th at Nelson Ledges, there will be full track time attack available, but they will be only for advanced and intermediate drivers. The reason for that being, which is pretty cool, we will be driving at the same time as regional road races. If anyone's gone to the End of Summer Festival in August, then you know what this is like. It's what we call a combination or mashup event. In essence, multiple programs all competing at once. But because of how the insurance is done, on April 30th at Pit Race, Steel City will be hosting it. Plenty of track time, but again for advanced and intermediate drivers. On May 6th at Nelson Ledges, it's a full time attack. It's a 1-day event. Reason for that being, the following day, One Lap in America is going to be coming to the track. Now, my understanding is that anyone who comes on the 6th, if you want to stay the night, wake up in the morning, we're going to be there to greet the One Lap of America people with some brunch. And I fully expect lots of camaraderie to happen Saturday night. So that's going to be a pretty fun one. June 4th is a track event only. It's a time attack on the South track only. That's going to be run in conjunction with the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix. So there's going to be a lot of vintage cars out. And on the North track, there will also be Extreme Experience. That might be a really cool weekend for anyone who wants to bring their family and friends. and for everyone to have an opportunity to go on track together. So those who are more committed come out to the South Track, run a time trial. Family and friends, if they want to experience going on track, they can go on Extreme Experience and drive someone else's car way too fast. July 2nd, pit race. It is a full track time attack. That will be in the afternoon. Auto Interests is going to have the track that morning. Steel City will have it in the afternoon. That's for everyone. Next one up, I believe, is the date I'm not allowed to talk about. But on July 8th and 9th at Nelson Ledges, there'll be a 2-day event. Saturday will be a track sprint. Sunday will be a full track time attack. Then the next event is going to be August 26th and 27th. That is the Time Trial National Tour weekend. That's also the end of summer festival. If you are a time trialer, track nighter, autocrosser, and you've gone to our events, but you have not gone to the end of summer event, I would really encourage you to check it out. Last year, it was the 4th biggest event in car count of anything the SCCA did.
Wow.
So solo nationals, runoffs, believe June sprints, end of summer festival, making a car count that event bigger than something like even Time Trials Nationals. That's huge. It's a lot of fun. Everyone should go. The final event is October 29th. That is at Nelson. Like I mentioned earlier, that's going to be open for advanced and intermediate drivers. Some things to also point out, because these are questions that we get pretty often with time trial. What if you're an avid time trial driver, you've been doing it forever, right? It's still the thing that you want to do, but you may want to get a comp license. You will have that opportunity August 26th and 27th. So good food for thought. Also, actually, you know what? That's pretty much it when it comes to the schedule. I was going to mention that one last piece, but that's the one last piece I can't mention.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for it, so I've got to really foot and mouth.
Bubble in. That is great. I want to talk about, you've got some great partners on board and some pretty cool trophies and stuff going on. So anything ranging from Hawk Performance, Misfit Auto Works, who's really involved in motorsports, Summit Racing. But the one I want to start with, Yellow Bridge Brewing, is going to offer surplus beer at the events. What is surplus beer? And how does that even exist?
Well, I know, right? Essentially, a good friend of mine, Ian Staub, is the owner of Yellow Bridge Brewing. And from where I sit right now, he and his wife used to live in a house just across the street from us. Really good guy. Long story made incredibly short. He was in finance and as a hobby started brewing beer. This stuff is incredible. It's some great beer. So myself and a couple other guys, we basically convinced Ian he has to do this full time. And Yellow Bridge has been around for now, I think, 5 or 6 years. I want to convince him to come out and play with us at some point this year. He's got a beautiful Golf Mark 7 Golf R. But he's willing to make extra, I'm calling it surplus beer. Every event, it's probably going to be something different. But we'll basically have like a small keg to sample his beer at our different, what we're calling it, camaraderie events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the camaraderie.
After we get off track.
After we get on track.
Off track.
The camaraderie doesn't begin until we're off track. So that's Yellow Bridge Brewing. Misfit Auto Works is another friend to many on the podcast. Nate Churchill is the owner out of Washington, PA. Nate does some incredible and awesome fabrication work. And last year started fabricating trophies because he helps host with the city of Pittsburgh a really great car show. And one of the things that's great about him is that he's less about the traditional trophies of who's got the prettiest thing, rather what's most rad, what's most cool, what's most unique, right? And so he's presenting some different trophies, things like most rad novice, most rad build. He's also going to make a trophy for the Spirit of Time Trial, and that's going to be for the championship. The Spirit Award within Time Trial is kind of perceived as the gal or the girl, the gal or the guy who really made the most difference to the program that year. And then we're also going to offer an award for the fastest of all, which is a challenge I'll talk to later. Hawk Performance, thanks to Mitchell, Annie, the whole team there, John and Alan Taylor formerly. But Hawk Performance is a great partner. Most of everyone in Hawk is local to us in Ohio, so I think half the field is pretty much Hawk Performance anyway. So we're gonna have them on for trophies, and we really appreciate everything that Hawk does. Summit Racing will be supporting the NEOhio events, which is incredible. We've got some love from Rad Air and Atomic Motorsport. We appreciate everything you're doing to help us market, Bill. And I believe that's everyone we've got right now. There may be a couple to come, but it's really cool to see how this whole program's come together, and people who aren't even in motorsport want to support it. So that's pretty awesome.
No, that's great. It's good to have all those organizations behind it as well. Let's go ahead, since you brought it up, let's talk about the fastest of all competition.
So I will mention this and let some of the other guys talk, since I'm getting tired of the sound of my own voice, and I apologize for that. One of the things that's really important about time trial is inclusivity, right? We want our events to be about the guy showing up in a Focus, the guy showing up in something quirky and fun. We want everyone to know that we want everyone to come, right? Our events are the most fun when we've got the most people. And so the OPTT Championship will be for the 5 events that are open to all competitors, so that everyone has an equal opportunity to compete for that season championship. However, that means that we're going to have a couple of events that are special, and what we wanted to do to amplify those events that are going on, specifically the ones that are for advanced and intermediate, is the fastest of all championship. Essentially, this challenge is an aggregate of your best time for the venues that we're going to. So whoever goes to pit race, whoever goes to our mystery 3rd location, and whoever goes to Nelson Ledges, your best lap time at each, 1, 2, 3, add them up. Whoever's got the lowest time is going to get a kick-ass trophy from Misfit Auto Works. And I'm really excited to figure out who that is and who's going to challenge Devin for those top honors.
Nice. That sounds exciting. Absolutely. I want to go around and I want to talk about everybody's other stuff they've got going on this year in motorsports. But before we do, is there anything we did not talk about time trials that we needed to?
Real quick. So this is stepping way back. We kind of skipped over it early on. This is going back to kind of the novices and people who haven't been to one of these events before. We were talking about how they grid us, where it's the fastest person goes out first and everything else. There are run groups, and the novices are grouped together. The intermediates are grouped together. We typically have enough advanced drivers that we may run 2 different advanced groups, but it makes it so that there's less of a chance that you're going to have somebody out there who's way faster than everybody else, especially in the novice group. Once again, I think Dan mentioned it, safety, right? We want everybody who drove their car there to drive it home. And if they drove it off a trailer, we want them to drive it onto the trailer at the end of the day. We want everybody to have a good time, a good, safe time. So we keep the novices grouped together, we keep the intermediates grouped together, and then the advanced people stay together. Because it also affects some of the passing. The intermediates and beginners have more restricted passing if they catch somebody, but it's all done out of safety. The advanced group are the ones that can kind of pass anywhere. So you don't want an advanced driver out there and an intermediate and a beginner driver out there, a novice driver out there at the same time. So we take that into account, and once again, it's all done out of safety.
No, that's good to explain that, so that someone that hasn't done it before knows that they're not going to be sitting next to a fully built Z06 with someone that's got 27 events under their belt when this is their first event. That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. Anything else that we skipped over or didn't talk about time trial wise?
Yeah, we did add 2
All right.
I think we're good.
time trials.
All right. Well, again,
Okay, no, go ahead. We added 2 things
Go ahead,
to
Chris.
time trial chase this year. We kept the points the same. It's the same point structure we had from 2022. And one of the things we did was we do have event drops this year.
Hey, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Chris.
Can you hear me?
Explain those points. We never actually talked about the points.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Let me back up a little bit. So, yeah, I was wondering if we were to get to that. So, it's going to be similar to those who did last year. For those who aren't with us, we have it awards points from position 1 down through position 10. And it's kind of, as Dan would say, F1 style. So, P1 is 15 points, P2 is 12, P3 is 10 points. And then it goes 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2 down to 10th place. And then everything from 11th on down, there's no points awarded. I don't think we actually clarified that last year, so it's out there this year. It's official. And that will be added up across the events we have there's the 2 bookend events that there's no novices in, so all the events in the series are the ones in the middle there. One of the things we did allow this year too, which we kind of had some people ask for last year, was event drops, and we are allowing 1 event drop this year. So out of our 5 counted events, you'll be able to drop 1 event. If you do all 5 events, and we hope you come out with us and do all 5, we will drop your worst event off and grade your 4 best events. And then the last thing is we added something that was kind of a nicety to our drivers. We added a hardship rule. This basically states that anybody who, say we have a 2-day event and you come out Saturday morning and you turn 1 lap and your engine goes, or you lose, you have a suspension issue or anything of the sort, every time session you miss after that will just be awarded a default time of 3 minutes. We kind of came to that because it's, 3 minutes works across both tracks. We don't have to, between Nelson's and pit race and the mystery 3rd track, we don't have to adjust that time at all. It's just kind of a placeholder time. At least it keeps you on the result sheet for the weekend, even if you don't finish. And it gives you something. So, if you're chasing points and your car breaks, it's not a total loss. You're still at least counted for that weekend. You'll get something out of it depending on where you are in your class. So kind of glad to have that one in there for us as well this year. So those were the 2 big changes we did. Everything else is pretty much straightforward from carryover from 2022.
that's great. And that hardship rule, that 3-minute lap, that'd actually probably be a faster lap than I would have run anyway. So maybe I'll do a start and park kind of thing with that. That's great. Well, gentlemen, thanks very much for sharing about the OPTT time trials, explaining all of that. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put tons of links in the show notes so that the listeners can just go there, click, and learn all about this awesome program. But before we wrap up, I want to hear a little bit more about your personal seasons, what else you may have going on other than this. So, Taylor, we're going to start with you. So what else do you have going on this season?
So main thing is I do need to finish rebuilding a World Challenge Corvette and actually drive it. So from that standpoint, I just hope to do some shakedown runs with it and maybe do some time trial with it to get more acclimated with the car. And I would really like to participate in a vintage event with it. That Pittsburgh event that Dan was talking about earlier, I was lucky enough to drive a vintage Indy car at the Shenley Park course. I'll be doing that again this year, and I really, really look forward to that. I'm a big vintage car guy. That's kind of my bread and butter, so I look forward to participating more with some of the vintage events.
Tell us more about that Indy car.
It's a 78 Lightning. It was one of the cars last ran by a privateer in 1983. A guy named Phil put it together from a wreck of a Lightning and a wreck of a McLaren, and it ran a stock block Chevy. And it never qualified for the show as is, but a pretty famous Porsche driver named Hurley Haywood drove it in 1980, back when it was a stock Lightning, and finished, I think it was 18th for his only Indy 500 trip. So luckily, I have a friend who owns the car. He's been very generous to let me drive it, and it's every time I get behind the wheel of the car, it's a lot of fun. It's got a modern sprint car engine in it, makes too much power, runs on methanol, and it's kind of terrifying. So
What a blast! What a cool opportunity.
It's once in a lifetime experience every time I get in the car. I thought I would only drive it once, and I keep saying that was as good as it's going to get, and then I get lucky enough to drive it again somewhere else.
Yeah, I want to add one more question as we go around. What's the best racing or performance driving advice you've received, Taylor?
It's been to slow my hands down. I've been known to kind of get a death grip on the wheel and start to overdrive the car, and I didn't really notice it as much until one of my friends, Mike Skeen, was able to look at a video and could tell that I was giving a death grip to the wheel. Just relax the hands, slow the inputs down. And I realized I was overdriving the car, and it really helped me smooth out, just smooth the car out.
That's great advice. All right, Chris, what else is going on?
How cool Taylor Allen's friends are.
Yeah, I heard the name drops.
Guy
I
with
didn't-
the car.
Mike Sheen.
May or may not have crewed for Jeff Gordon at Indianapolis.
Very lucky to do that this past summer as well as
Needs to be
Jeff
on
Gordon.
the podcast soon.
I keep asking.
No, I know. I'd love to be on it again if you invite me.
We will do that for sure. Chris, a question moves over to you. What's the rest of the season look like, and what's the best motorsports racing advice you've received?
Rest of my season, I'm going to try and keep up what I did last year with the OPTT series and run every event. I had like a perfect season, so I'm going to just give that another shot and hope my heap of an S2000 holds together. I really want to go visit another track, but I was looking at like Indy region. They have a couple of tracks I really like to go visit, like Gingerman and stuff, but every time one of those tracks is on the schedule, it like overlaps. And I'm laughing because Taylor's talking about the Vintage Grand Prix, and I worked safety at the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, and I didn't know Taylor the last time he was there, and I was standing right behind you, and you didn't know it. But I'm like, that guy looks really familiar. I'm pretty sure I've done track stuff with him before. So I'll see you again out there this year. But the Vintage Grand Prix is right over top the Gingerman event, I believe, so I don't think I'll get a chance to get out there with Indy region this year. Otherwise, I'm not too sure. I know the endurance event's coming up at Nelson's. I'm sure there'll be a seat for that somewhere. I haven't really worked anything out yet. It'll probably be a last-minute deal, like always with me. And probably a little bit of casual autocross here and there. And I'd like to try and get down to Time Trial Nationals again this year. I got bumped up a class with SCCA, so it's a whole new ball game with all the cars I'll be competing against. And I'm really just kind of curious to see where I slot in. And we'll see how it works out. And then as far as advice, my advice I got that's kind of helped me is kind of weird. I had a friend years ago who used to do all kinds of actual like seminars on driving. His name was E. Paul Dickinson. And one of the things he gave that for some reason sticks in the back of my head was, I guess with summer would be careful what advice you receive. He always used to walk around and tell me, always be wary of the guy that comes up to you and tells you, this is the trick for getting through this turn. Let me show you the trick. And he's like, there's no tricks. And that was always his thing. He was a very old school, like long before data and anything like that. He like drove way back in the 70s and whatnot. And that might not be everybody's approach, but it did teach me kind of a valuable lesson, is to be careful. Because I used to have friends when I was autocross, like, oh yeah, this turn's flat foot, put your foot down. And then like a few minutes later, I'd be off in the weeds wondering why I listened to them. And so I kind of kept that with me as I came up through, as I just started doing more track stuff. And someone would say, oh, this is flat, or you can break down at the one marker. And I'm like, I'll take that into advisement. But, you kind of work everything as I kind of work up the stuff a little bit. So that was always my advice. I thought that was really good.
That is good advice. Eric, let's talk about the rest of your season and the best driving racing advice you received.
Sure. So my season, I guess technically actually started last week. I was out in Sonoma with Skip Barber taking an advanced racing class, working on getting my full comp license with SCCA. In theory, I think I just have to submit some paperwork and I'll have a full comp license, which will be kind of fun. But beyond that, I'm hoping to get to all of the OPTT events this year. I only made it to 3 last year, and one of them I only made it to 1 of a 2-day. So, of course, I probably ought to get my car back together. Currently, the motor and transmission is sitting perpendicular to the car in front of the car with no turbos on it. But I did get the first of the 2 turbos rebuilt last night, so we're making progress. And then I'm also on an endurance team for Champ Car, so we've got a couple of races planned there, and we're also planning on doing that 14-hour with SCCA. I'm really hoping to get to drive at night this time. I tried to do the 24-hour last year, and the team I was on didn't even make it to dark. So that's kind of the big hope for this year is to, I think I'm hopefully doing four endurance races and hopefully every single one of the OPTT plus the mystery track. So we'll see how that goes. One of the best pieces of advice is keep your eyes up. You need to look a lot further ahead of you than you think you do to be fast. You go where you look, and if you are looking, right at the corner, you're gonna go right to the corner. But then where you're looking, you got to keep your eyes up. And even last weekend at Sonoma, I had an instructor radio in, Eric, keep your eyes up. Oh yeah, okay, yep. He could tell from outside of the car that I was not looking far enough ahead. So keep those eyes up.
Great advice. And Dan, what does the rest of the season look like for you and the best racing driving advice you've received?
I really don't have too much of a clue as to what the heck I'm doing this year. I'll be in a Lemons race, a pit race in April. I hope to get my Volkswagen. Eric, my Volkswagen doesn't even have half of the components perpendicular to the car right now. So you and I are both riding the mechanical struggle bus. I might be one stop behind you on that train, but we'll be competing in that car at Nelson Ledges once I get Humpty Dumpty put back together again. Also, Chris, I need a driver, so just consider yourself written onto the team at that point. But for goals for this year, really, this year's been more about bucket lists type of things. I was able to compete in the Hoosier Super Tour in February at Circuit of the Americas, which was just incredible. And really looking for more of those kinds of things. I think the next fun thing I want to do is a coworker of mine and I are going to buy a $1,000 Craigslist car and try to compete in that at Solo Nationals this year. Just to have some fun, and then maybe take it to Rallycross Nationals, and then when we're done, we can have a Viking funeral, which would be a really fun camaraderie opportunity. Honestly, best piece of advice, and I'm someone that for whatever reason people ask me for advice, but last year for me was a really incredible year because I got to do a lot of driving in the B-Spec class. And actually, I want to vouch for something you said, Bill, which is the importance of seat time. I've been driving time trial autocross a million different forms for 5 or 6 years, but really spent a lot of time trying to get as much seat time as possible last year. And why I mention that as being important, it allowed for me to reach a different level of confidence in the car, and as a result, a different level of performance in the car. And so as much as advice and data and different things can do different things for you, I think there's no substitute for experience. And I really experienced that last year, and really hope that events like the OPTT, Track Night in America, and other entities like Auto Interest and Endurance Racing really help a lot of people get on track, have fun with cars, and get as much seat time as possible, because that's really the best way to hone your skill.
Awesome advice.
So is everyone on today going to do the Enduro at Nelson?
Yeah,
That's the
I think
plan.
I totally forgot that I signed up to do that with John Butler, DJ Mitchell, and John Chevelle in that BMW, the Big Red. So I'm happy to I'll be there with you guys.
That'll be a blast.
Now that I know that you're out there, I'm going to make sure to have reinforced bumpers.
Well, the good thing is, I mean, the biggest possible probably car on the track. It's a 4-door M5 M series. God, 5 series, not an M5. Jeez.
Yeah, that thing's built like a tank, but that thing's quick.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be a blast if we're all out there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I have one last question. It has to do with being late to grid, and everybody but Taylor has previously shared late to grid questions. So I have 2 late to grid questions. One for Taylor. Have you ever been late to grid?
Yes.
All right. Is there a story there?
Kind of. It was when I first got the World Challenge car, and I couldn't get it into reverse and missed my run section. And then I went to start it. It wouldn't start, and I had to jump it. It has 2 lithium phosphate batteries, so it was a pain in the butt to start. And I got to go out. It was at a Grid Life event. So I'm in this X-Pro, World Challenge Corvette. It's a nightmare. I'm terrified to drive it. And I'm with the Sunday Cup Honda Fit group. It's one of my favorite pictures of that car because I'm in a pack of Honda Fits and I'm in this vet, and it was great. And they're like,
wow.
Just go out. You're late. You got to go. Yeah.
Oh, that is good. And then if somebody is late to grid at any OPTT event, what's the penalty? What happens to them?
I think if they're a beer drinker, I'll give them the worst beer in my cooler.
I think that's a good penalty. Well, gentlemen, it was great having you on. This is super. If it's okay with you, I will put links to your Instagram accounts because you guys all have them. And that way, folks, if they want to get in touch with you or kind of follow your journeys this season, they can do that. So thanks again for sharing everything.
Great. Thanks for having us on, Bill.
Yep. Thanks, Bill.
That's
Thank
great,
you,
Bill.
Thank you, guys. This was a lot of fun.